Most who delve into the lore of Tolkien's mythos are most likely familiar with the names Beren and Lúthien. They get a reference in The Lord of the Rings, with Aragorn mentioning them as a kind of precursor to him and Arwen, being the first romantic relationship between a human and an elf. This is one of Tolkien's premier love stories, and they even got a book in 2017, although, unlike The Children of Hurin, the book Beren and Lúthien tell many different versions of the same story, and they can get very bizarre. Now, before we get into why it's so strange, let's start by giving you some context. Beren and Lúthien took place in the First Age, in Beleriand, a region that was in the western parts of Middle-earth before it got nuked during the War of Wrath. It follows Lúthien, the elven princess of Doriath, and Beren, the chieftain of the House of Bjor. Although a lot of people don't know about it, what makes Beren and Lúthien such a big deal is that it's the first recorded instance of a human and an elf falling in love and eventually having children. Although they were quickly followed by Tuor, another hero of men, and his wife Idril, the princess of Gondolin. This is what made these love stories so unique in Tolkien's world. But this wasn't always the case with Beren and Lúthien. You see, despite being one of his first stories, Beren and Lúthien was never published by J.R.R. Tolkien. Instead, his son, Christopher, took his father's notes to publish, including unfinished and unused drafts. Now, some of these drafts came before Tolkien had a concrete idea of the world he was building. The Hobbit was a distant thought, and the first drafts of Beren and Lúthien were written during World War I, toward the end of 1917. The chaos of the world embedded itself into Tolkien's writing, and if you've read Beren and Lúthien, you'd know that it gets really weird. Don't believe me? Well, Beren isn't a chief of man in the early drafts. He's a gnome. No, I'm not kidding.
The story you are about to see has been told before. A lot. And now we are going to tell it again. But different.
Now, let me be clear about Tolkien's gnomes. They aren't the little garden ornaments doing sus poses in your lawns, nor are they the goat Scanlan. No, gnomes were the alternate names for the Noldorli, which would later be called the Noldor, meaning that earlier versions of Beren and Lúthien didn't have what makes the tale special today, a love between an elf and a human. Well, kind of. I mean, this is only partly true. You see, this version of the story isn't consistent. Sometimes Beren is human, other times he's a gnome, but he's consistently an idiot. In the very first draft, Beren was a human, but Tolkien scribbled over this to make him a gnome, hence the inconsistency, but this version of the character basically shares nothing in common with canon Beren. Canon Beren is brave, a mighty hero and a great warrior, and while he doesn't always make the best decisions, I mean, poor Finrod, man, he is competent. His earlier gnome version is a moron. Now in the canon version, when Beren and Lúthien start falling in love and Beren asks Lúthien's father, Thingol, for a hand in marriage, he does everything he can to prevent this from happening. Elves only fall in love once in their immortal lives and can die from heartbreak, it isn't just Padme. But the problem is, Beren is very much mortal. Were the marriage to go ahead, Lúthien would have a very short life, hence why Thingol sends Beren to get the Silmaril for Morgoth's crown. He sets it as an impossible task, hoping that the marriage will never come to be. Now this isn't the case with Gnome Beren, because he's immortal. He's just not the right class to be marrying a princess, so when Thingol tells him, "You can marry my daughter when you get the Silmaril from Morgoth's crown," he's saying it as a joke, as if telling somebody they can have something when hell freezes over. But, as we said before, Gnome Beren is an idiot, and decided that this was a reasonable request. The moment he begins his journey, however, is when things start to get really weird. For the most part, Lúthien is basically her awesome self throughout most versions of the story. I mean, she's a fairy in this draft, and I'm not entirely sure what that means. I don't know whether that makes her a super duper elf or a pixie kind of thing, but it doesn't really matter. What does matter is that she's still intelligent, brave, resourceful, and very much in love with Beren. Knowing that her lover gnome is an idiot, she goes after him, and it's a good thing she does because Beren gets captured by one of Morgoth's lieutenants who, and I promise you I am not making this up, is Tevaldo, the Prince of Cats. Does anyone else find it crazy that the Dark Lord has a pet cat as one of his lieutenants. Guess it shows you where Tolkien stood on the cat versus dog debate, doesn't it? But let's get back to the gnome. So, Beren is sent to work in Tevaldo's kitchens after his capture, but the feline prince immediately takes a disliking to him because he... because he smells that Beren is a dog person, and decides to make his life miserable from that point. But that's not even the funniest part of this entire thing. You see, Tevaldo gets replaced by Sauron in the canonical version of this story. Sauron goes by Thu at that point. So Tolkien doesn't just dislike cats, he thinks they're so evil that cat royalty is as bad as the Dark Lord Jr. Which, I mean, is something I adore as a dog person. Luckily for Beren, he had the child to bag somebody who was more than just a damsel, and Lúthien comes to his rescue in both this version and the canonical version, because she's actually one of the most overpowered characters in Tolkien's lore. Now, in this version, along the way, she meets Huan, who is quite different from his canonical version. Here, he's the captain of the dogs, sort of like the dog counterpart of Tevaldo, although his status as a wolfhound Chad remains the same. Just like in the canon version, Lúthien and Huan hatch a plan in order to save Beren, and this plan begins with Lúthien allowing herself to be taken by Umian, the door cat. This is so ridiculous. So, Lúthien is brought to Tevaldo, and while Tevaldo considers bringing her straight to Morgoth, he instead listens to her story and learns that Huan is allegedly injured in the woods nearby. So, Tevaldo grabs his cat posse and goes to follow Lúthien to him. Problem is, she was lying because she's smart! And the Prince of Cats finds himself ambushed by his doggy rival. An epic battle ensues, a battle between dog and cat, good and evil, and I mean, yeah, Tevaldo didn't really stand a chance. I mean, he brought two of his thanes with him, but they're basically useless. One of them gets killed straight away and the other one just runs. And it turns out that Tevaldo had a spell over the other cats to make them big, evil, and obedient. After getting absolutely bodied, Huan forces Tevaldo to reveal the words to undo the spell, and together, Huan and Lúthien free gnome Beren. Now, Beren was also trapped with an older gnome named Gimli. I don't know whether Tolkien decided to reuse that name for our boy Gimli, but there you go. Let's just ignore him, he's the inferior Gimli anyway. Now, the story from here is largely the same as in the canon version. Lúthien puts Morgoth, the Dark Lord, to sleep, because she's that powerful apparently. Beren then steals the Silmaril, gets his arm bitten off by a massive wolf, then they flee back home, yada yada yada. A lot of the details are different, but the general story beats and the characters involved are the same, except we're not quite done with Tevaldo yet. We've already inferred that Tolkien must have hated cats, and this continues further since we include a little bit about Tevaldo getting cursed and banished by Morgoth. He wasn't happy about losing his army of cats and then being put to sleep and getting his Silmaril stolen, and he took his anger out on poor Tevaldo. Now, it is stated that Tevaldo wants to get revenge. He wants revenge on Huan, on Beren and Lúthien. He also wants to get back into Morgoth's good graces, but he just can't. He has no army of cats, he has no powers, and he's already been bodied by Huan. He seethes with anger, and this seething goes so far that the entire race of cats live bitter lives thereafter. Considering that Tolkien's work was meant to be mythology for England, this is his explanation as to why cats are just dicks. I love that he felt like he had to go out of his way to explain this. Now, if you want to compare this messy draft with the canonical version of Beren and Lúthien, I suggest actually getting the book or reading the Silmarillion. Nerd of the Rings also does a brilliant video on this, so definitely check that out, I'll leave that in the description. And I might consider having a shot at it myself, since Lúthien is my favourite character in Tolkien's mythos. But if there's anything you're going to take away from today, know that Tolkien, the grandfather of fantasy, was definitely a dog person, so eat that cat, people!